You're gonna be happy.
Happy Christmas.
Shoppers Drug Mart. SCTV, we're coming through for you.
Good morning. We start today's proceedings with a short, bright, definitive interview with His Worship Mayor Mike Harcourt of the great city of Vancouver, a man who was swept to resounding victory over that Johnny-come-lately Van der Zalm, and Mike got 87,000 votes. Now, the control of Vancouver City Council is politically in the balance since Bruce Yorke was ruled to have been improperly elected. There are 5 COPE, and there are COPE Harcourt COPE coalition. There's 5 NPA. Whether Walter Owen or Bruce Yorke wins this by-election will decide the future of council for the next 2 years. And the man with the key to the man who's going to win is Mike Harcourt. How is he going to vote? For Yorke, Harcourt COPE, or is he going to run his own candidate? Or is he going to vote for Owen? We'll find that out from His Worship in downtown Vancouver very shortly indeed, I trust. Also this morning, jobs for British Columbia. But jobs in this country brings protests when it's jobs created by the mighty US military contract machine, now an open door to BC men. And here's what happened in Vancouver yesterday.
I'm not going to argue it with you. It's a fact of life. Either you leave now or you will be charged. No, hold it this way.
This was because Bob Wenman, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Defence in the new Tory government, had escorted a number of US arms contract experts into Vancouver to discuss the possibilities of jobs for a hard-pressed British Columbia industry from the US military affairs. So we'll be interviewing Bob Wenman on this topic on the program this morning. Now, I hate to tell you, but there's an aspect of the Olson case which I intend to discuss this morning. I am quite puzzled by the fact that a lawyer who was in effect requested by the RCMP to act for Mrs. Olson, and it was this lawyer's actions without question which enabled the Mounties and the authorities to get the finite evidence which convicted Olson because of the $100,000 for evidence deal, bodies and evidence deal. He and the other lawyer, Mrs. Olson, have now been found totally liable for $100,000 given by the Crown to Mrs. Olson through this lawyer. And I cannot understand it at all. I'm not expressing any views about the rights or wrongs of the victims' families, but I'm going to have a past treasurer of the Law Society here and an outspoken man by the name of Harry Rankin to give me his views on this particular situation caused by the judgment of Mr. Justice William Traynor. Also this morning we're going to have our Culture Corner. And our Culture Corner comes from a friend of mine, Kerry Dodd, who is manager of the Emily Carr Gallery in Victoria and has done a great book with Michael Brewer, Sunlight in the Shadows, about the aforesaid Emily Carr. But first to downtown Vancouver and His Worship, anxious to give me the answers to my specific question, Mike Harcourt, after the break. Mr. Harcourt, who are you going to vote for in the by-election as between Phillip Owen of the NPA and Bruce Yorke of the Harcourt COPE coalition?
Well, Jack, that's none of your business. That's why we've got a secret ballot. I think the major issue here is why the voters are having to go through another election. We've been electioned out in this city. We've had provincial elections and federal elections and municipal elections, and I think it's really unfortunate that we're having to start the new year with another darned election.
Mr. Harcourt, you live by the rule of law, a prominent member of the legal profession, a man who upholds the legal establishment, I'm sure, in every way. Are you suggesting that Madam Justice Proudfoot's ruling was wrong and should be overturned?
No, I'm suggesting that there is, of course, a process under the two processes, as a matter of fact, under the Vancouver Charter, which is the Constitution of the City of Vancouver. People can, under that charter, either seek a recount on the vote or can ask for a challenge, which Mr. Owen did in this case, on the affidavit votes. And I think it's really unfortunate that we have to go back on a technical argument on people being sworn in on an affidavit vote.
Mr. Harcourt, there is going to be a by-election, yes or no?
There is going to be a by-election. I think it's unfortunate, Jack, that it's going to cost us $250,000 that we could use for other very important functions, such as the food bank, and people that need it very desperately.
If you want to have an inquest, perhaps it was sloppiness in the charter amendments and in the way the election was handled which caused it, but it has happened.
Yeah, well, listen, Jack, I think the real problem is that we had a record vote. This was the highest vote total that this city has ever seen, of almost 150,000 voters. About 6,000 voted through this affidavit vote procedure, which has been in effect, Jack, by the way, throughout the province since 1976 and other municipalities. We got it for the first time this time.
But you didn't handle it properly. You didn't handle it properly.
Well, listen, those 6,000 people are valid voters and valid votes. That's fact number one. Fact number two is we have a highly technical legal argument that some of those people,
Mr.
not
Harcourt,
all, Jack, some of those people, I'm not dodging at all.
You are dodging.
The major issue is, why do we have to have an other by-election?
Because the judge said so.
Okay, but the judge said so because a loser candidate
won a court case.
Took this matter before the courts and wants to come in the back door when he can't win through the front door.
Are you suggesting that Madam Justice Proudfoot is opening a back door?
I am saying that this candidate had a choice to take this lawsuit or not, to accept the will of the public in this city that he lost, and he lost again, and to try again next time and come through the front door. He could have suggested to us ways that we could have made this first-time procedure of an affidavit vote be more effective next time. Fine, I have no objection to that.
Mr.
But to put us through, Jack, another election at a cost of $250,000 and bring our council to a standstill for 2 months, I think is really a disservice.
I do not understand you, sir. I asked you a simple question. There's going to be a by-election. Are you going to vote for your old friend Bruce Yorke of Cope? Are you going to run a candidate from your own group? Or are you going to vote for Phillip Owen?
Well, we're not, the Civic Independents...
You can swing the election.
The Civic Independents, Jack, have made a decision not to run a candidate because we respect the decision of the voters in the November 17th election. And just because, on a technical argument, we're going to have to go to a by-election, we're not going to be part of submitting the voters of this city to another election and to the extra costs that are caused by this election. We think it's unfortunate, we think it's unnecessary, and I really am disappointed that we have to subject the people of this city to another election after they've listened to all the arguments and come to a conclusion and voted.
Okay, I got one answer, Mike, and that's a victory this morning after about 8 minutes. One, you're not going to run a Civic Independent candidate, correct?
Correct.
Are you going to campaign for Yorke, or will you sit on the sidelines?
I'm not going to, I'll tell you what, Jack, on this one, I'm telling you, as I said at the beginning of the program, it's a private affair when you go in the voting booth. I'll tell you, though, I find it very hard to support somebody who has unnecessarily put us through an unnecessary election at extra expense and brought our council to a very difficult situation for at least 2 months when we have a number of serious negotiations we've got to conclude on LRT, on Canada Harbour Place, and a number of other very important issues.
But no magic wand will move away this problem. But you did tell me just now, did you not, that you will not campaign for Phillip Owen?
No, what I've said is I find it very hard to support somebody who's caused this whole mess in the first place. And I think it's very unfortunate that people in January, in tough weather, are going to have to go out and vote once more when they've already made a decision, and because of a legal technicality are going to have to go out at extra expense to vote again.
A judge of the Supreme Court said the election was invalid, there must be a new election, and everything else is now water over the dam.
I'm not objecting, Judge. Judge Proudfoot, I know quite well. I respect her legal capabilities and talents, Jack.
But
that's not the point. The point is, it shouldn't have been before the court in the first place. That's the point.
All right, let me try one last thing. With the removal of Yorke, is no longer elected, is it correct that there is now an even balance on the council of 5 NPA and 5 of the Harcourt Coalition?
Well, actually,
is that correct?
No, it isn't, Jack. What you forget is that there are 2 team members of council. There are three NPA.
Okay, let's say that the Harcourt...
There are 2 civic independents, Bill Yee and myself, and there are 3 COPE. There is, as we've had for 4 years now, we've had a minority council without one particular civic party having a majority on council.
All right. Does it split broadly between right and left, team and NPA on one side 5, civic independents and COPE on the other side 5? Is that correct?
It depends on the issue. If it was to come to the budget, if it was to come to the budget, and it was to come to issues dealing with trade union rights, it would be a split vote. If it comes to a lot of other issues, I have voted, as you know, as Bill Yee has, as the balance of power in the council, according to what we think is best for the city. So I don't think it's a straight 1-2 sort of a situation.
On the big issues like cutting back on staff, it's a straight, even 50-50 council. Is it a fact?
That's right. But we won't be dealing with that, Jack, until May, April, May.
Is it a fact that the person who is elected, be it Owen or Yorke, will change the political control of council?
On those kinds of votes, yes.
That's correct. So therefore, it's absolutely key where you throw your weight, because your sympathies lie with Yorke. Is that not correct?
No, I'd put it the other way, Jack, that my sympathies certainly don't lie with the Nonpartisan Association and never have, and they certainly don't lie with somebody who couldn't win the election through the front door, has to come through the back door.
Has COPE asked for your help?
I have not talked to representatives of COPE at all, and I can tell you that I am not going to be active in a public way. I've got lots of other business to deal with. That doesn't mean that some of the people that have worked in my campaign aren't going to be involved in the election, but as a party, the civic independents are not going to be publicly involved in this election campaign. We've got lots of civic business, Jack, to deal with. I've got lots on my plate.
You're going to sit on the sidelines?
I'm not going to be sitting on the sidelines. I'm running the city right now, Jack, with a mandate that's the largest mandate that any mayor has received in this city, and I intend to carry that mandate out. I've got a very important 2 years coming up. This is interfering with it. It's an aggravation. We have our centennial. We have Expo coming up. I have some major Pacific Rim business initiatives to create jobs. There's lots to do.
We're just talking about one day in the ballot booth, and you, sir, the most powerful political figure in the city of Vancouver, refuse to get off the fence and tell people how you're going to vote, which will tell them how they should vote, and your nomination will win the election. Why don't you say that you want Yorke elected right now and Yorke will win? If you don't say that, Owen will win and you'll lose your power.
Oh, I'm not convinced of that, Jack. I think that there's going to be a real backlash in this election for people having to go out and slug it through the snow towards the end of January, beginning of February, for an unnecessary election. And I'll tell you what I'm going to do, Jack. I'm going to be like you. I'm going to say the last election is over. I'm going away for a vacation with my family. I'm going to come back in the new year, and we'll sit down and have another talk of this. In the meantime, you get over there and play some golf in Hawaii, get some sun, calm down, let's have an enjoyable Christmas season, and best wishes to you.
Listen, Your Worship, Mike, I'm not on the spot. You're on the spot. You have refused to get off the fence. You have refused to have any intestinal fortitude and name the candidate whom you want to win. And that candidate, with my knowledge of your politics and your attitude, must be Bruce Yorke.
I'm not in any spot. I'm not in any spot or any fence at all. I have made it very clear. I think this is an unnecessary election. I think there's going to be a backlash. I think people should win to get on council through the front door, not the back door.
But you will vote in the election, will you?
I certainly do, and that's why we have a secret ballot in this city, and I intend to participate, but I'll do it in my own time and in my own way.
And you're not going to tell the public at any time between now and the election date which candidate you endorse?
I didn't say that at all. I said let's go off and enjoy Christmas and relax a little bit.
But you're in a hell of a spot.
There's still a lot of time to go before the by-election takes place. I'm going to be speaking, as a matter of fact, to the two candidates involved over the next little while, because I want to see what they're going to do to help me carry out my mandate.
Don't you know the difference
between
the two? Don't you know the difference in the philosophies between Yorke and Owen? One's a developer and one is an active left-winger.
Yes, I think I know their differences, Jack. I've heard both of their campaigning for a number of elections. But what I'm saying is, I think the public are being put through an unnecessary election at extra expense, and I think it's unfortunate that this candidate did that to us.
Well, you better tell that to the courts, sir, because the election is on, and I'm very grateful to you, actually, for coming this morning. I hope you have a good holiday, and I shall remember every time I hit a golf ball in Hawaii that Mike wouldn't get off the fence on this by-election.
We'll see you in '85, Jack.
Keep your head down, swing slow, and be careful which candidate you endorse, if any. Thank you, Michael Harcourt.
See you, Jack.
See you after the break.
Live in peace and unafraid, and into plowshares turn their swords. Nations shall make war no more, and into plowshares turn.
This is the first living, real-life Conservative MP of the Mulroney steamroller who has been on the Webster program since that magnificent victory of the forces of the right, or should I say more accurately, of all those people who hated, detested and despised Trudeau and the Liberals. Good morning, Bob Wenman.
Well, it's good to be here with you, Jack, and I'm very honored to be the first living, live Conservative of this strong new government that Canadians are so pleased with.
Well, it's nice to see that you can all talk, because we thought you'd all had Velcro lips.
Well, Jack, I've never had a problem to talk, especially talk with you. We've talked so many times over the last 18 years. I'm glad to be with you again.
Now, the Pentagon's traveling roadshow is, you describe the Pentagon's, how many jobs can be obtained for people in British Columbia by the access being given to U.S. military contracts?
Well, right now in these related industries, we have about 40,000 direct jobs, which is the equivalent of about 400,000 indirectly involved in this industry in Canada.
Now?
Now. And
as of this moment?
As of this moment.
Working
so we're
on
talking,
military contracts?
Military contracts or related contracts. A military contract is the Department of National Defense in the United States is, in fact, like selling to a large city the size of Vancouver. You sell everything to them. They buy everything. It's a big market. Last year, they bought $1.2 billion. And that $1.2 billion was our ability to access approximately $80 billion. In other words, we got less than 2% of the actual bids there.
You mean Canada last year sold $1.2 billion of the defense equipment to the United States?
Of defense equipment, of all kinds of equipment, to the Department of National Defense in the United States.
Now, who were this group of people you had in town yesterday whom the protesters attempted to make trouble for?
Well, what they are is they are, in fact, representatives of the buying group for the Department of Defense in the United States. And what the problem we found has been is we have the right to access the market through Canada-U.S. free trade arrangements in defense, but the access of the market, somehow it hasn't quite been accomplished to a satisfactory degree. The $1.2 billion out of $80 billion, less than 2%.
Who were these people you brought yesterday?
They are representatives from the Department of Defense in the United States.
How many of them?
There were about 21 that came, and they came as a result of a major initiative by our Prime Minister, who sees economic growth and the creation of jobs as a #1 issue. Therefore, he said, let's try and help Canadian businessmen get into the easiest,
How many
nearest
businessmen
market.
came to the seminars?
Well, this was the big surprise to us. In each case, when we started, we thought we would have 50 in Halifax, and we ended up with 270 there. And we thought, again, we'd have a smaller amount in Montreal. We had 400 there. When we got to Toronto, we expanded from the 400 we expected, and we pushed the walls out to 500. And then finally, we had to provide extra meals for 600 people there. In British Columbia, which has a very small share of this market at the present time, Ontario 40%, Quebec 40%, and the West only about 8% of that trade, but we had about, well over 300 people at our conference yesterday, again from an anticipated 50 to 100. So it was a tremendous success.
Were they
across the
given
country.
details of specific contracts on which they could bid now?
What they found out was how to do it. It's a how to access the market, who to contact, and where you actually go to find the contracts. There are some 300 to 400 various departments across the United States that in fact buy these products, everything from nuts and bolts to toothpicks or whatever you want to name. And they brought about the names, list of names. This is who you go and see about this. And a businessman who had a product to sell would come in and say, this is my product. And they'd say, well, you go and see this person, this person, this person, give you the name, the telephone number, and an ability to access.
How long would any of these contracts take to come to actual jobs or fruition or business for BC?
Well, we're finding actually with the process of interconnecting the businessmen, as some of the businessmen have said across the country, these are people that they've been trying to be in contact with in the United States that are right in front of them. One contract that was brought about during this period of time, 4,000 new jobs, selling computers to the United States, and these computers were for, just like computers you have in the office here, just to do the business work that is associated with the paper mountain that comes with a large corporate.
They're not all making parts for nuclear bombs or Lytton Industries?
That's a less than 50% part.
So actually, you put them in touch with suppliers with such mundane things as trucks and marine aids and navigational equipment and office equipment?
In British Columbia, it seemed the emphasis of people who came were the marine area, electronics, and areas of high technology. There's a lot of innovation and innovative ideas here that are perhaps fresh to the Americans, and I think a tremendous opportunity.
When will we know if this access arrangement has been successful for jobs in BC? Because we need them desperately, and I think most people in BC don't protest no matter what is sold to the United States for defense purposes.
I suppose one of the surprises was not the demonstration and the protesters, but the size of it. It was very small in British Columbia and across the country, and I think that is reflective that Canadians want to strengthen the alliance that we have in NORAD and NATO. There's a strong sentiment for that and feeling for that, and there's a strong sentiment. People are tired of anti-Americanism. They're tired of the kicking our friends in the face, and they say, let's make friends again, and let's in fact access their market. And Prime Minister Mulroney's down there saying, and you bring your investment capital to Canada, help us create jobs in Canada, and they seem willing to do that.
Well, if we did $1.2 billion worth of defense business last year with the United States, we should be getting about $120 million here, 10%, shouldn't we?
We should, and
we're not getting anything like that.
I would say the West is not getting its share of the market. Now, I'm not suggesting that we should get a share of what Ontario and Quebec are doing. I'm saying we should expand into that market. We should provide the opportunity for British Columbians. And as the Parliamentary Secretary for Defence coming from British Columbia, I'm certainly going to try to assure that British Columbia businessmen can access those markets, and anything.
Any businessman who missed that meeting, can he get in touch with you, and will you give him the proper access for his equipment through your Pentagon contacts?
Well, we're going to follow this up, the whole process. Those that were invited but were unable to attend will in fact get a package of information that was provided there. And anywhere that we can expand the list, we're glad to expand the list and provide the opportunity. I've found that already. We're getting calls and people saying, I didn't know about the meeting. Well, that's partly because of the time element that was involved. This was only less than 2 months ago. Prime Minister, our Prime Minister and
you have a program called the Defence Industry Productivity Program. Does any of that lolly come to British Columbia?
Well, it has the ability to come to British Columbia, but it has to be sought out by our actual businessmen. And this is what we want to try to help our businessmen become more aggressive marketers and more aggressive, even to access Ottawa has been a great difficulty, I think, for British Columbians. And I hope that we can improve that with the new government.
We find it still kind of difficult politically to access Ottawa because nobody knows that there's any towns west of Winnipeg when you phone ministerial offices. Could you tell them that when you go back?
Well, I would say that certainly there is a transfer in the transfer of power, the transfer of people, and people finding out who goes where and why and how. The West is finding new voice there, and that new voice is...
All right, now what about your conscience? What about your conscience? You're a bit of a... I suppose I know you're for the nuclear freeze.
No, I don't support the nuclear freeze at all.
I thought you were a bit of a peacenik.
Well, let's say that I'm a humanitarian and I care about peace, and that's why one of the reasons I'm doing what I'm doing, because I believe...
Did your conscience bother you in helping to build up this massive U.S. military machine which could put us all into a Holocaust tomorrow morning if Reagan presses the wrong button.
No matter of fact, this is what is preventing the Holocaust. It is a matter of balance, and it's when the world power blocks become out of balance that, in fact, you have conflict and war. We're keeping it in balance.
We'll take calls from businessmen who want access. Perhaps you might suggest what product you want to make for the U.S. military. Or we'll take calls from protesters. To Bob Wenman, been in House of Commons now, what, 20 years?
Well, 6 years at the provincial level, a couple on council, and I think 11 or 12 or something in Ottawa. Since 74, 10 years, I guess. 11,
in Ottawa.
In
But
Ottawa.
before that in Victoria
6 years
and
there
on the council.
2 years on council, that's right.
You're a glutton for political punishment, but you finally made it. You were in a seat of power.
Well, it's a great opportunity.
Bob Wenman, Fraser Valley.
Fraser Valley West.
Fraser Valley West, MP. Wants you to do business with the states on war materials, military contracts. Tell me if you want to into the act, or tell me if you want to protest after the break. I know it's Bella Bella. I think I'm illiterate. Go ahead, Bob Wenman.
Mr. Wenman.
Yeah.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. In view of the $154 million cutback in defense spending being singularly the biggest of all your government's cutbacks, and in view of Doug Roach's statement on this program last Friday that Canada voted against the UN's nuclear freeze because the timing isn't right for any radical change in Canada's foreign policy.
Hold on, I'm not discussing foreign policy this morning. Like it or lump it, old friend. You ask good questions, but you do become a bit of a bore. Go ahead from Wagalisla.
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment and then I'll hang up, Jack. I'm really tired of hearing people who are in favor of building arms calling themselves humanitarians and that they think they're deterring some type of Holocaust. It's a fallacy. It's an absolute fallacy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's a protester. That's two protesters. Go ahead, please. That's you. Hello. You're on the air now. Please speak up.
Good morning, gentlemen. Mr. Wenman, I'm a reserve army officer in Canada, and this might be a little bit of a fastball, but Mr. Coates came out and made a statement, I think it was in the weekend paper, saying that he wanted to beef up the reserves in Canada. Is there any sort of move that's going to investigate the other reserve forces in NATO to put our reserves on a par, i.e. that companies have to give reservists 2 weeks off a year to do military training, that sort of thing?
The answer is yes, we are preparing a major parliamentary task force across the country to discuss exactly these items, and Mr. Coates has projected that we would move from a reserve of 21,000 to a reserve of about 50,000, which does have a lot of opportunity, I think, for young people in Canada.
Thank you. Go ahead from Seattle.
Seattle?
Yep. Seattle.
Yes.
Well, do speak up, sir. Put down your television sound or you'll drive us all crazy.
All right. I'm a devout listener of your show. We appreciate it so very much. I just want to have a word to say about Canadians getting involved in the United States problems of controlling their military. I think it's a terrible mistake to consider saving jobs by making war material. I think it's a horrible distortion of reason. Rather than take the easy way of immediate jobs, that the unions and the citizens of Canada should take the time to work out their economy on a logical basis.
Sir, I appreciate your sentiments, and I'm sure Wenman does too. Right at the moment, we're in the selfish position of having a horrendous unemployment rate, which is seriously affecting the ability of our governments to maintain our small s socialism safety nets. And I hate to tell you, but it's highly unlikely the majority of Canadians wish at the moment to walk away from anything that means a job apart from the actual construction of nuclear weapons. And thank you for your call. Do you mind me answering that question?
No, I agree very much with you. The priority is on economic growth and development, but also we mustn't forget that we have established our defense policy. We are maintaining the peace through a defense alliance with our NATO and NORAD partners. That's an important basic decision that has to be made as well.
I was more enthusiastic about that aspect until I interviewed Helen Caldicott the other week, which kind of made me a little horrified. Go ahead, please.
Bob Wenner, I'd like to congratulate you on your re-election and your common sense approach to our friends, the Americans. It really is a weird city we have here in Vancouver that would elect a communist, and you have a left-wing baiter sitting right beside you who endorses that. And I just want to, again, congratulate you.
Well, first of all,
who's the commie and who's the left-wing baiter?
Well, you wouldn't say Bruce Yorke was...
Oh, but yeah, but he wasn't elected.
You support him?
I support him? You're
it's obvious that you're a left-winger.
Oh, I see. Thank you very much.
Let me say that I think it is important to accept these statements of friendship with the United States. My writing, you know, Jack, it has this very sentimental monument there called the Peace Arch. On one side it says, brethren dwelling together in unity and children of a common mother. Those basic values and those basic relationships with the United States need to be restated.
Go ahead to Bob Wenman. That's you.
Hello.
Go ahead, Jack.
Yes, Mr. Wenman.
Yes.
Just wanted to remind you, I met you yesterday and I appreciated the meeting.
Thank you.
Listened to the seminar and they said, be persistent and be aggressive. Now, as the inventor of a new machine gun and a representative of Chipmunk Arms, I'd like to remind you that I'm both persistent and aggressive. We want to get started here. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jack.
I know of your persistence, and I appreciate the fact that you came to our meeting with the former Liberal Senator Guy Williams. We're pleased to see you there. I know you're going to be persistent, and I wish you success in developing the market.
He has invented a new machine gun, which probably works, you know.
There's a lot of inventiveness in Canada that is
Go
not
ahead,
known
please.
about.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I support the issue fully. You know, it gets me with the people in BC. They all sit around screaming for jobs. Then they blow a great opportunity like this. They get a lot of jobs.
Well, you know, sir, they didn't blow it one bit. We had the biggest turnout that we could have ever imagined, standing room only, and Canadian business wants to do business and wants to create jobs, and we're going to provide the access and opportunity to do it.
Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Hello, that's you.
Okay. During the Vietnamese problem that we had absolutely no qualms about letting all these so-called peaceniks into the country and allowing them to go to college here. And by the same token, we supplied arms to the Americans at that time.
Well, what's the problem?
What's the problem?
You mean we're hypocrites?
Huh?
You mean we're hypocrites?
Of course.
Well, we've always been hypocrites. Go ahead, please.
Must be the British background. I remember Neville Chamberlain in Great Britain when Europe was going down the tube, had the same attitude a great deal of British Columbians have. I'm glad to see that at least one person in the Canadian government is for Americans and to help the Americans and to maybe help themselves get some jobs. That's all I have to say.
You know, we're not just helping the Americans, we're helping Canadians. We're doing this not only in the point of job, but because we're part of an alliance with both the United States and Europe, remembering back to those days as you have done.
Bob, I'm going to send in a little mission. As soon as you know of any specific jobs and specific contracts, will you let us know?
I certainly could, and in fact, on the television and the radio across the country yesterday, many businessmen who were interviewed who have made access, who in fact have made contacts that will lead to jobs. So there is a measure of success already from the tour, and I'm optimistic that we can help build the economy of Canada in this way.
Okay, Bob, don't let the power go to your head. My thanks to Bob Wenman. Next, a deadly serious discussion with Harry Rankin, past treasurer of the Law Society and a bencher, of course, on the question of this decision which makes two lawyers and Mrs. Olson totally liable for the $100,000 which was put in a trust fund on the payment for cash for bodies and evidence after the break. I asked Harry Rankin, who's a past treasurer of the Law Society of BC and a bencher, and a highly experienced criminal lawyer and civil lawyer, if he'd give us the benefit of his thoughts on this complicated business about the Olson Trust Fund. We don't want to retry that horrible business all over again, but we know the basic facts. The police made a deal, and the Attorney General and the Department of Justice in Ottawa. They all made this deal together. $100,000 for bodies, and really, 30,000 of that was specifically for evidence. Otherwise, Olson would not have been convicted. Basic facts are that a lawyer by the name of McNeney, Jim McNeney, got a letter from the RCMP seeking his assistance in this matter. He was engaged by the other lawyer, Shantz, or rather passed on to him the other lawyer, Shantz, and he set up the trust fund for Mrs. Olson. There was a Supreme Court action recently on behalf of the families of the victims looking to recover that 100,000, perhaps for it to be applied to compensation. And the lawyer McNeney has been found liable with Shantz and the Olsons for the $100,000, and I do not understand it. How can a lawyer who is properly doing his duty for a client be nailed for that, Harry? I mean, it doesn't sit right with me, with all due deference, respect, and humility.
Well, I never knew you to have any due deference or humility, but that's something new for you today. I simply say this, that the judge's decision does not stand the scrutiny that I would understand a judgment to have. Judges make decisions. It may be a very popular decision. I heard one member of the family say you shouldn't profit from crime. Well, people have been profiting from, they wouldn't go into it if they couldn't profit from it. They either profit from it in gratification, in some perverse way, or in money. But the fact of the matter is, you've said it, any lawyer that involves himself at any time in the future to deal with this kind of issue, where you want to get one of the most dangerous men in history, in our history, off the street, would say to the police or the Attorney General, you go bowl a hoop. You see, maybe nice lawyers don't get into this business. They may be the benches of the Law Society, for all I know, that deal with corporate frauds and things of that sort amongst respectable people in the clubs. This was a dirty business. But it was a dirty business that put Mr. Olson behind bars where he belonged, and it was done by a lawyer, and whether he did everything exactly correctly, I will never know, nor will you, nor anybody else. But the fact of the matter is, maybe the rest of the money should be taken back. My guess is this, that people, the kinds of people that police have to deal with are going to be much more leery of dealing with them in the future.
I can understand a decision being made to give the trust fund back. What I don't understand is a lawyer acting in good faith for a client to whom he has been guided in effect by the authorities to help them get the evidence, because 30,000 of that was not just for bodies, it was for evidence.
That's right, that's right.
Is how he can be nailed potentially by himself for the whole 100,000.
Look, I serve as a member of the Finance Committee on the part of a police, senior officer of the police force, dealing with the question of rewards paid to people who turn in evidence. They're not nice people. Mm-hmm. But one thing we do, and we're meticulous on, whether they're nice people or not, or even borderline involved in it, if they do what the reward says, we pay it. We don't pay it because we like them or anything else. We pay it because it's a policy question, because you need that kind of evidence in terms of having evidence against criminals, especially dangerous criminals. I do that not as a routine matter, but periodically I'm called down to the police boardroom and we go through the thing. I look at the criteria, not at the individual that's getting that money. You know, after all, we have a lot of precedents for paying out money to criminals. 30 pieces of silver was paid, that was the original payment to a criminal. So, you know, what is, you know, all of a sudden people are becoming moralistic about it. Yeah. It wasn't a moral issue. It was a very practical issue of getting a very dangerous man off the street. And Mr. McNeney and Mr. Shantz, to that extent, played their particular role in it. I fail to see, I've tried to analyze it every way I can, I fail to see how they could have been held liable in this matter. And, you know, I don't know them that well, but I'm simply saying if it were them or anybody else,
I mean,
that was a bad decision.
For years we've been paying $20,000, $100,000, new identities for drug traffickers who think on their friends, haven't we?
Yes. Yes, we have.
And this was a case where money was paid to obtain the conviction of Olson.
Yes.
And what can be done now for this lawyer, if anything?
He will appeal it. You know, some people say the law is the law. I heard somebody say that the other day. Well, you know, those who have enough money to appeal, many judges say with some pride they've never been appealed. What they mean is they're at a lower level of courts where people haven't got the money to appeal, so they think that their judgments are all sound.
Should the
judgments are turned over?
I mean,
looking at
it as an outsider, and I was now looking at it as an outsider, it seems to me there were a number of parties to this. There was the RCMP.
Yes.
There was the Attorney General of British Columbia.
Yes.
There was the Department of Justice in Ottawa.
And the top brass there.
Yes, there was the minister involved, the
That's
Solicitor
right.
General or the Minister of Justice.
That's right.
They were all party, and they wanted to do it. And they couldn't do that without an arm's length transaction with a lawyer acting for the other party, because if the Mounties had gone along with $10,000 bills, Olson wouldn't have done it. They'd have just taken the $10,000 back from him, wouldn't they?
Right. They need.
Why were they not all enjoined?
Well, you know, the fact is, you might have 5 people commit murder, 3. You may pick the worst one to rat on the others, and you say, well, why wasn't he tried as well? He gave evidence against the others, and he got immunity and went free. Happens every day. This is not a perfect legal system.
No.
Or a perfect. And don't forget, there's another contradiction some people have. They think a legal system is a justice system. Well, it may or may not be, but it isn't necessarily so.
Do you think McNeney has been unfairly dealt with?
Yes, I do. And I think that Shantz has been unfairly dealt with as well.
Yeah, I should have. I wasn't discussing the Shantz thing so particularly, but
well, they're both there.
They're both there.
Yes. Yes, I think they've been dealt with unfairly. Otherwise, I wouldn't come here and say that.
Do you think that the Law Society should perhaps take steps to act on behalf or to help these lawyers in this situation?
Well, I don't think that's the role of the Law Society, quite frankly. That has never been their role. They're, in fact, in charge of the lawyers, and they're in charge of the disciplining of lawyers. We may even find these 2 men before them charged with some offense. I don't know.
Because of these proceedings?
That's right. But I would have think this, that the Attorney General has a duty to make sure that they don't suffer from this judgment.
Who should have? I mean, the fact was
I think he has a definite.
I know
duty.
that McNeney, and you know too, had to pay subsistence to Mrs. Olson of some $20,000.
I don't know whether he had to do that or he didn't have to do that.
His only charge, he wanted to do it for free, and his only charge for disbursements and whatnot was $2,000. Yeah. He was the guy who stood by for 3 weeks every day taking the phone calls to arrange about the transfer of the money, without which the RCMP would not have got their conviction. Right. And now he's liable, if the others haven't got the money, he and Shantz are liable to bring back the $55,000.
Yeah, 30
and another $45,000.
Yes, that's correct.
Now,
no, there makes no sense at all.
Well, who should pay the money?
I think the Attorney General should. You know, at the end of it, we have 10 families. What will be left for them? I mean, or whatever the number are. What are we talking about? Are they entitled to reimbursement in that particular fund?
Well, the trust fund will come back to this country. There's no doubt about that, I know. But somebody's got to pay the extra $45,000.
But the point is, what will happen? What will the $100,000 do?
Nothing.
What will it do? Something specific, or?
You see, what really concerns me about it is I've got to get that little clip. Hold on a second. I want to read this bit to you. Where the hell is it? I'll read it after the break.
You see, I want to make another point.
Take it away. I'll read it after. An unpopular discussion I'm having with Harry Rankin this morning. Anyone who appears in any way to perhaps criticize, we're not criticizing the victims' families who got this judgment from Mr. Justice Traynor to return the $100,000. But he said, this is what I wanted to get, Harry. Mr. Justice Traynor said in his ruling that to leave the $100,000 paid in the control of Clifford, Robert Olsen, Joan Olsen, the 2 lawyers, would be contrary to justice and good conscience, meaning that McNeney and Shantz had done things contrary to justice and good conscience. Now, they were asked to do it, in effect.
Of course they were. But those are words, too, you know. And with all respect to the judge, they're not very legal words. They're just words. Of course, if you were talking in some high moral area, nobody wants to give money to a criminal. Nobody wants, especially a man like you know, Olson, who would want him to have anything except the strictest punishment for what he did? And we don't even use the word punishment, you know, we read all kinds of other words. Of course everybody wants that. That's not the issue. The issue is, did we want Olson off the street in jail where he could do no more harm? And did McNeney and Shantz, with the complicity of the RCMP, the Attorney General of the day, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer, the highest officials in Ottawa, want that as well? They did. It was the right decision, and the two people at the bottom end of it ought not to suffer for it. Sure, you can make all the fine words you want sitting on the bench. But they had to do it there under those circumstances, not on the bench.
All right, had you been asked to do this job, and you might have decided at some stage to do this job, what conditions would you have laid on the Attorney General and or the RCMP and or the Department of Justice?
I probably would have done it the same way as they did it, because I'm no specialist in trusts, etc. The answer is, probably a little more experience, a little more horse sense. I would smell any general traps that might be there. But the answer is that right now I wouldn't do it if they came to me on bended knees. At that stage, I would have thought, if somebody said to me, well, look, Mr. Rankin, this man has got to be gotten off the street, and these are the terms of it, I'd have probably said, well, look, sure, I'll help if I can. Of course I'll help. And I wouldn't have thought that at the end of it, somebody would have put the knife to me for it.
And sued you for it.
And sued me for it.
Made you liable for a $100,000 trust fund.
Or ruined my reputation for it. No, I wouldn't have thought that at all.
That's a grave danger for McNeney here, is it not? Yeah. So therefore, do you suspect the Law Society might bring him up in front of a discipline proceeding for this?
I have no idea. But I say that, the words of the judge sort of are certainly not laudatory words, are they?
Because everyone has just been saying, oh, great, they're getting the money back, forgetting about the involvement at the police request.
Getting what money back?
The 100,000.
Well, they're going to get 55,000 and will probably return. There'll be legal fees and costs, etc. out of that. So if it were money, why, I think that the Attorney General should have reimbursed those families if that's what's the issue.
And would it not be poetic just that the Attorney General pay the lawyers for their duties done, especially McNeney, to enable the conviction of Olson to take place?
Would have been nothing wrong with it, in my opinion. Nothing wrong at all. The Attorney General pays out large sums of money. The City of Vancouver has paid out large sums of money. The whole history of Canada in terms of big conspiracies involving drug addicts is to pay out large sums of money. This is a case that has got a lot of sensation, because of the terrible case that it is. But the principles aren't any different. The RCMP has hundreds of thousands of dollars, which they have their trained stool pigeons in. Don't forget this. Olson was part of their setup. They got him out of jail. They looked after him for years. They, in fact, made him feel like he was one of them.
Ex officio.
Now, they obviously didn't intend him to go doing what he did, but the fact that he was doing what he did was partly the immunity that he had because of his special treatment with them. They created that monster, too.
I don't want to try the thing again, but I'm grateful for your view this morning that you feel that McNeney and Shantz have been unfairly dealt with in this judgment.
Totally unfairly.
As a matter of conscience and policy, for men who, especially McNeney, who supplied the evidence, in effect, the convicted Olson, this should not have happened.
Certainly, neither one of them should be responsible for a penny, and they should have been reimbursed for the time that they put into the matter. That's my opinion.
Stay for another segment. We might talk a little politics. We might take some phone calls with Harry Rankin after the break. Oh, the wrong one. Go ahead to Harry Rankin.
Hello.
That's you.
Hello.
I like to say that the RCMP should pay the money, not anybody else. The RCMP has made a lot of mistakes in their time, and when it involves citizens, they try to cover up by trying to get the money back.
But when it's in with criminals, nobody knows about it.
Fair enough. You'd say the Mounties should pay.
Well, the Mounties pay, the government pays. What's the difference in the taxpayer
That's true,
pays?
yeah.
You know what I mean? In the end, the taxpayer pays. I think the issue is somewhat different. Here, the money that will go back presumably to those families. I don't know. I'm just dealing with the one issue, whether McNeney and Shantz were dealt with fairly, and I say they weren't.
Fair enough. Go ahead, please.
Period.
Oh, yes, I find myself in agreement with most things that Rankin says or does, and including his jogging, but this I can't agree with him on this basis, that the lawyers receive fee-for-services from that fund.
No, there was one payment only of $2,000 to McNeney, which was mostly disbursements. There was one payment, $10,000 to Shantz, which was returned shortly thereafter. Ipso facto, there was no payment to Shantz.
Yeah, there was no money. If you know, that is the case. I think that they should have been paid separately and apart from any trust monies for the work they did there. You know, that's, after all, that's the 3 or 4 weeks or months or whatever they spend that they're not doing something else. I don't take them to be rich men or anything else that can, you know, sort of volunteer their time or effort. I simply say this: go back to the fundamental issue. We wanted that man desperately off the street and into an institution where he would never be heard from again, and I hope after this he never is heard from again, and they facilitated it happening.
Go ahead, please.
Hello, Harry Rankin.
Yes.
I agree with you. The lawyers, everybody, whether it's a small crime or a large crime, is eligible for counsel. Now, the thing is, with these lawyers are being unfairly dealt with. I figure that the RCMP already had this guy in custody, and it's up to them to pay the $100,000, not the lawyers. The lawyers are defending a criminal, and I feel that the government itself, whether it's a provincial government or a federal government, both should check into this judicial system, because I think it stinks.
Thank you.
Well, you know, I think the rule of law is better than the rule of no law, and you know, our system's not perfect. You have to compare it then to where there is no law. I think we are able to look at the cases where the worst injustices show. And, you know, there's all kinds of them occur daily, but the fact of the matter is that's not a condemnation of a legal system. That's a condemnation of the outcome of this particular issue.
Go ahead, please.
And I think that should be kept in mind, too.
Go ahead,
There's a lot of
please.
issues that are solved reasonably well.
I want to make a point with regard to the money itself. And, well, it's regrettable that what happened to the families of the victims of Clifford Olsen.
Yes.
The point of their legal suit was that nobody should profit from a crime. The very fact that Mr. Olsen has profited out of this thing, and the suit's been brought in order to see that he doesn't. I think that the money itself should go back to the government, and as far as the lawyers themselves, they were just acting in a position of assisting in the government in gathering evidence.
Correct.
And assisting them where they couldn't get the evidence any other way. That's got to be kept in mind. The fact that he was in custody, unless they were able to get something further on it, he wasn't going down, or he might have gone down for one of them or otherwise. You know, in other words, whatever the motivation in Olson's mind, which is always self-interest, whatever he does, that was the way it was going to be done.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I believe that what the last gentleman said is entirely correct. The lawyers were just acting in the best interest of society. Olson had to be paid the money for the peace of mind of the families, and I don't really believe the families are concerned with where the money goes, as long as the Olson family itself is not profiting from this horrible crime that was committed.
You may well be correct and very perceptive. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm calling about there was an article in the paper last night about a fellow in Winnipeg. Now, he's on for his third trial for murder. Now, he's a relative of mine. Now, it's been the third time now, and I've been back there for every trial. Now, the police have, one of their witnesses was an illegal alien in Canada.
I don't think you're very relevant,
No,
old boy.
just a minute now. The charges against this fellow are all dropped. Therefore, the police they're cohorting, and who are they getting paid for?
I don't understand.
Well, I think what he's saying is...
And he's on his third trial. I think that's one of the first times it's happened in Canada. Now, why should this fella be there?
All right, there are two issues there. He's back for his third trial on technical questions that arose that his lawyer was successful on. That may not have anything to do with guilt or innocence in the narrow sense, but it's a question of a fair trial. Secondly, we're always using tainted evidence. In other words, the illegal immigrant may have 5 charges against him, plus having held over his head the fact that he's going to be deported. And so what the man is saying is, maybe his evidence is suspect. Now, all of those things, of course, should be painted out by the defense counsel, prosecutor, and judge, and the jury, who are 12 reasonable people. They presumably weigh that evidence, and hopefully properly, and say, all right, the defense counsel says, look, he's selling you this evidence because he's going to be deported if he doesn't tell you the truth. He's a crook, he's a no-good scoundrel, and you shouldn't believe him. The prosecutor says, despite all those things, here's the evidence. So those issues are weighed in court.
I know, but...
and people have sometimes some difficulty with that. Many times in drug cases, you have one of the worst of the conspirators given immunity by the court system, and he testifies against the others. We know of some of the big cases right now that people have got life sentences based on their evidence.
At least you're front and center as ever, and on this issue your position is that McNeney and Shantz have been unfairly dealt with in this judgment, and that it's most unfair to nail them for a $100,000 trust fund or any part of it, when in fact McNeney especially was acting as an agent really for the RCMP in making sure the deal went through.
As their representative, okayed by the Attorney General and the highest law officials in Ottawa.
But having to do it in the interest of his client, as he is bound to do as a lawyer.
That's right.
Who was Mrs. Olson.
That's right. And Shantz, on the other hand, also had a client that a lot of lawyers might not like. Well, and I've had clients that I didn't like and nobody else liked either. And I'll tell you this, even a lot of the people out there that are crying will come and see lawyers if they have some problems, because that's the way it is.
My thanks. I'm going to ask you. No, I won't. My thanks to Harry Rankin. I'll be back after the break. Kerry Dodd, is it Dodd or Dodds?
Dodd, no
Dodd,
S.
D-O-D-D. Kerry Dodd is manager of the Emily Carr Gallery in Victoria. Is that part of the Provincial Archives?
Yes, we're an extension of the Provincial Archives.
Right, now, when did you conceive the idea of bringing out the Landscape of Emily Carr, Sunshine and Shadows?
Well, it was really, the beginning of the book was an article that I did for Beautiful BC magazine. In 1980, what I wanted to do was to go over the paths of Emily Carr's up in the Queen Charlotte Islands and the Skeena Valley and produce an article showing the difference between what Emily Carr saw and what you would see today, and compare photographs with paintings. And that was really the beginning of the idea for the book. Michael Brewer, who's the photographer for the book, saw the article and presented it to Oxford and said, wouldn't it be great to do a book from this? And they agreed and approached me, and I was really thrilled.
Does every picture coincide with one of her paintings?
Well, not every one evokes a particular painting, but everyone is faithful to paintings that were done in that spot. For example, when she was in the Skeena Valley, she was painting totem poles, and in the book you will find the totem poles of the Skeena Valley which she painted. So the paintings are behind each photograph or ahead of each photograph.
All right, I forgot to ask you, who was Emily Carr?
Emily Carr. Emily Carr was a creative genius. She was a multi-talented, highly complex woman who has really taken the forefront in the Canadian art history, I would say, a pillar of Canadian art history. A fascinating woman.
Where was she born?
Right in Victoria, 1871 on Government Street. In fact, there's a photograph of her birthplace in the book.
And when did she die?
1945, March
And
2nd.
what was the great, did she get any great official recognition as an outstanding painter? Because people used to regard her paintings as kind of oddball, didn't they?
Well, some people did. You know, some people were very slow to recognize her genius, but she did have some very favorable exhibitions in her lifetime. She had a magnificent showing at the Dominion Galleries in Montreal, for example.
I didn't ask you, is she one of the group of 7?
She was the only woman associated with the group of 7. If it had been the group of 8, she certainly would have been one of them. Lorne Harris especially really put his arm around her shoulder and said, what you're doing on the West Coast is what we're doing on the East Coast.
Now,
so if anyone can be associated with a group of 7, it's Emily Carr.
how much were her paintings worth at the top?
Oh, that depends on so many things.
Give me one price.
Well, if you go with $40,000 to an auction, you may stand a chance.
Of picking up an Emily Carr?
Depends if it's a small watercolor, a large finished oil, what the provenance is. But you need to have a pretty
Let's see
fast
that little montage,
checking
and
account.
Kerry will tell us what's in the montage. She hasn't seen it before.
Oh, dear.
Here we go.
Ah, this is the first image of the book. That's easy. That's Ucluelet, where Emily Carr, whoops, onto Kishpiox right away. These are early travels of Emily Carr. She was in Kishpiox in 1912.
Let's see, we've got music in the background.
This you'll recognize from Stanley Park, and this one too. Stanley Park was one of her favorite sketching spots, but it's the totem poles there that she had painted in Alert Bay. This is Cathedral Grove and up to Port Hardy. There's quotations, of course, with each one of these images. This is near Port Renfrew. We wanted to show a variety of the places in British Columbia as well as the variety of her paintings. Buccaneer Bay, Goldstream Flats, another favorite sketching spot.
Of hers?
Of hers, yes. And of course what she's very famous for, her forest interiors, the cedar of Goldstream Flats, Esquimalt Lagoon, where she was painting in the day and writing in the nights. Beacon Hill Park, you recognize that?
Mm-hmm.
Flowers are always very important to her. Oh, I'm glad this was chosen. It's one of my favorites. A tree in Beacon Hill Park, which my daughter found, in fact, and said, look, Mommy, there's an Emily Carr tree, and it really is. Swans in Beacon Hill Park. This was chosen more for a quotation to explain.
Because you came up with a fair amount of unpublished material on it, didn't you?
Yes, yeah, that was very interesting work. It was, in fact, every excerpt in the book has not been published before. So for people who find Emily Carr a great writer, and there's many people who do. In fact, if people don't love her as a painter, they love her as a writer, but most people appreciate both sides of her talent. They'll find in the book writing that they haven't read before.
I got to tell you, I was telling you before the show, I had a friend who died recently who had a fantastic collection of Emily Carrs.
I wonder where they are now.
I don't know. And I used to drive him around the bend because every time I went into his house and he'd show me his latest acquisition of some fabulously expensive painting, I would say, which are the Emily Carrs? And he would say this, and I would say, which one is the fake?
That would make him very nervous because it's such a delicate question.
Is it not a fact that there are fake Emily Carrs around this province right now, perhaps being sold for fancy prices to which the sellers are not entitled?
I don't know of any. I don't. But it is a really delicate question. There's so many things to consider. You have to be careful.
Yeah, I know. But she died where, here?
She died in Victoria, not a stone's throw from where she was born, in fact. You know,
Was she married?
No, she wasn't.
The James Bay Hotel?
Well, she died in St. Mary's Priory, which is now the James Bay Hotel. You can have a little walking tour of Carr country when you're in Victoria.
Yes, I've been in one of the houses she lived in at one time or another. Kerry Dodds, how much is the book, Kerry?
It's $14.95.
And it's Sunlight and the Shadows, the Landscape of Emily Carr. I'm going to have a free-for-all between now and the end of the program, but Kerry will stay here. We'll probably turn up some friends of Emily Carr, or somebody who may have an Emily Carr and tell us what they're going to sell it for. Does the Provincial Archives does your gallery have a good collection of Emily Carr?
There's 300 items in the Provincial Archives
collection. Do they
collection.
belong to us, we the people?
Yes, yes, and they're on exhibit at the Emily Carr Gallery, 1107 Wharf Street. There's a certain selection of the collection mounted at any given time, so you can come and see different portions every time you're in Victoria, Jack.
Don't go away, Kerry. I'm going to keep you here in case anybody wants to talk to Kerry Dodd about Sunlight in the Shadows, the landscape of Emily Carr, and I'll take whatever comes my way between now and 10:30 if you want to be nice and nasty after the break. Go ahead, please.
Oh, good morning.
Morning.
Jack.
Yes.
Yes, my name's Todd Birch. I was speaking to Kerry Dodd last night. As a matter of fact, she called me from Vancouver, or Victoria. And I was explaining to her the problem I was having getting information on where to get one of her books. It wasn't solved until she got a hold of me, as a matter of fact.
Well, what's the answer?
Well, apparently Duthie's has some on the Robson store, at the Robson Street store right now, and I haven't been able to get through to them this morning to reserve one for myself. But the other problem is, going to two of the larger outlets in the Coquitlam Centre Mall, they checked their latest listings of books from Oxford Press and were unable to find any listings of her book at all. And her colleague at the archives in Victoria gave me the number of the Oxford Press representative in North Vancouver, and I was not able to get a hold of her either.
Well, I mean, you should be talking to Kerry off the air. Do you anticipate any problems about distribution?
No, I checked into it this morning, and apparently both Coles and Smith have ordered them. I talked to the Oxford University rep this morning, Todd, and they should have them. So speak to the manager of those bookstores, I'd say.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Jack, just one short thing on this Olson money deal.
Sure.
They made a deal. If they were an egg on it, one thing that could happen in the future, if they ever had to use that device again to be able to nail a person such as that or any criminal, that might not work in the future. And it's the cheapest way for the taxpayers to get somebody off the hook, or to get the public off the hook, or put somebody like that away.
Should only be done in absolute desperate straits, so I wouldn't like to see that Olson deal done again. The one point I was making this morning was that I think McNeney has been unfairly dealt with. Go ahead, please. Hello. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Webster.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm calling from Seattle, Washington.
Nice to meet you.
Have never seen you until the last 2 weeks. I want to tell you that I think you are one of the finest people on television in the country, and much better than anything we have in the United States.
I agree entirely.
Sure you do. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, ma'am. Hey, hooray, hooray for Webster. Smashing. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes.
Mr. Webster.
Yes.
I'm wondering why you're concerned for two professional lawyers called McNeney and Mr. Shantz.
Yes.
The decision against them, or whatever it was made by a judge on the bench, a legal decision.
Right.
And if they don't know how to defend themselves in the courts, I feel that they should be disbarred. It shouldn't be a public issue.
Well, I must admit you make a valid point. Lawyers have knowledge to defend themselves. I happen to think that the decision went the wrong way, and that I'm entitled to think, and even though I don't even like mentioning the Olson case again, it's a matter of considerable public interest, and so there be it. Go ahead from Chetwynd.
Yes. Hello, Jack.
Yes.
Yes, I called you about a week ago on the reforestation program that we have up here in the Peace River country in the South Peace, and I didn't get any call back on you from it, but what's happening up here is that we are apparently been notified here that there's supposed to have been federal funds made available for the reforestation, and they are using cats to clear off a bunch of poplar trees and so on and so forth, and
I don't remember getting a call, and I don't know the details. Hold on, we'll take your number. Go ahead, please. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I'm calling from Victoria,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd like to ask Kerry where she got the title for the book, Sunlight in the Shadows. I think it's just beautiful.
Oh, well, thank you for asking. I'm happy with the title, too. It is actually a phrase of Emily Carr's. When she was painting in the forest, she said she was looking for the sunlight in the shadows.
Beautiful. And I'm looking forward to seeing you Wednesday night.
Thank you.
Oh, you're going to have a wine and cheese party. Are we allowed to say that?
Oh, no, it's my invitation only.
Oh, no, invitation only.
I have
Thank you,
1,000
ma'am.
people coming.
Go ahead again from Victoria.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good thing that we can see this attractive book, Mr. Webster. If you hadn't had Mr. Rankin's fresh air of reason on beforehand, the snow piled up by Mr. Harcourt was obliterating your camera lens. There's a legal aspect, surely, to that election, not all that Mr. Harcourt was ranting on about poor losers. The ballot boxes, had there been any indication of stuffing, they would have had to spend the money for another election. Now, the scrutineers didn't see that those affidavits were sworn, so they have to spend the money for another election.
Madam Justice Proudfoot's decision was perfectly proper, perfectly correct. Harcourt would not agree even in effect that there should be another election, and that is palpable nonsense.
Well, it's called a snow job, and it's a lovely Christmas gift for you at this time.
Great snow job from Harcourt.
Mr. Harcourt, no, I would
Not
have
to
liked
me,
to ask Mr. Rankin.
to the people of Vancouver. I've got to take a break. The other day I got a telephone call from Phil Herridge, the grandson of the famous NDP CCF MP, as a result of which I sent Steve Wyatt up to the Arrow Lakes to do a story on the cusp.
They are a victim of this persistent downturn in the lumber industry, but there is a greater frustration here. The people say they have the mills, they have the equipment, they have the manpower and the jobs to offer, and most of all the spirit to bring this town back up on its feet again. But they are being denied access to the raw material because they cannot get a piece of the action, namely part of the tree farm license in this area.
I would put 20 people to work within a year if I had a timber supply.
So what are you saying? You just want a piece of the action around here?
Essentially, I want a piece of the action.
Half of the people who live here are unemployed. As near as we can determine, 54% is the unemployment rate.
It's conceivable then that Nakusp could turn into a ghost town if nothing changes.
I think Nakusp is well on its way to being a ghost town already.
And Steve's report on Nakusp, with all their problems, will be on the air tomorrow at 9 a.m. And also here, hopefully, to answer the allegations, will be a big noise from West Star Timber or from Brick, who own West Star Timber. That's our major effort tomorrow morning. Steve Wyatt's report on the town that's dying, Nakusp, at 9 a.m. precisely. Watch Mike Harcourt on the spot on Check at midnight.